I stand for the light. I'm here to help. I stand for the light. The light is my strength. Justice shall be done. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Is there danger? I stand for the light. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Justice shall be done. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Justice has come. Of course.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. I stand for the light. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan.
You are past redemption.
Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor.
Our brethren's town is
sound
under
plan.
attack.
Certainly. For honor.
Justice is come.
A sound plan. Of course. For honor.
Betrayer of the light.
Of course. Bounty. A sound
Our
plan.
brethren's town is under attack.
Certainly.
Betrayer of the light.
For honor. A sound plan. Of course.
Justice has come.
For honor.
Has been killed.
Of course.
Our brethren's town
Certainly.
is under attack.
Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Bounty. Of course. For Lord of a sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under
course.
attack.
For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor.
Betrayer of the light.
Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For my father the king. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. You say danger? I stand for the light. You say danger? For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For my father. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. You are past. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. For my father the king. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
I stand for the light. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan.
Our
Certainly.
brethren's town is under
For
attack.
honor. Certainly.
under
Of
attack.
course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor.
Betrayal. Our brethren's town is under attack.
Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Is there danger? For honor. The light of my strength. For Lord Aron. Of course. A sound plan.
An allied hero has been killed. Our hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack.
I stand for the light. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. I'm here to help. For honor. A sound plan. For honor.
Our brethren's
Sound.
town is under attack.
For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course.
An allied hero
For
has
honor.
been killed.
Of course. Certainly. I'm here to help. For honor. Justice shall be done. A sound plan. For honor. I stand for the light.
Betrayer of light.
A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. I'm here to help. A sound plan. Of course. I stand
Our
For
brethren's
honor.
town is under attack.
of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
An allied
Certainly.
hero has been
For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
betrayer of light.
Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Allied hero. Our hero has been killed.
Justice shall be done. For I'm here to help. For honor. Justice shall be done. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Our town is under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan.
An allied hero has
Of
been
course.
killed.
A sound plan.
An allied hero has been killed.
I'm here to help. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor.
Our brethren's
Of
town
course.
is under attack.
Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Is there danger? Certainly. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For Lord of the You are past me. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound
An
plan.
allied hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack.
I stand for the light. For honor. The light.
Our brethren's town is under
A
attack.
sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Our hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack.
I stand for the light. I'm here to help. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Light is my strength. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly.
Feel
Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound. Of course. A sound plan.
justice. Betrayer of the light.
For my father. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Foul. For Lord Around. A sound plan. Is there danger?
Our hero has been killed.
Justice shall be done. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Stand for the light. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course.
Justice is done.
A sound plan.
Our town is under attack. Betrayal of the light.
A sound plan. Certainly.
Our veteran's town is under attack.
Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course.
Our veteran's town is under
A sound
attack.
plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. I'm here to help. For honor. Is there danger? Of course.
Our
A
veteran's
sound
town
plan.
is under attack.
Justice shall be done. Is there danger?
Take your time. Look around.
Justice shall be done. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan.
Our
For
veteran's
honor.
town is under
Of
attack.
course. I'm here to help.
Our veteran's town
For
is under
honor.
attack.
Of course. A sound plan. For honor.
Feel my wrath.
Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Is there danger? The light is my
Our
strength.
veteran's town is under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Foul. Feel my wrath. You are past redemption.
Certainly. Of course.
Betrayer of the light.
A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course.
Our hero has been killed. Our veteran's town is under attack.
Justice shall be done. For honor. Of course. A sound. Of course. Of course. A sound. Light is my strength. For honor. sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certain. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. The light is my strength. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan.
Our
For honor.
brethren's town is under
Certainly.
attack.
For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound
Our
plan.
brethren's town is under attack.
For Lord Aron. Certainly. For my father. For honor.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Foul
Our
name.
brethren's town is under attack.
A sound plan. For honor.
Justice.
Certainly.
Betrayal of light. Our brethren's town
Of
is under
course.
attack.
For honor.
An allied hero
A
has been
sound
killed.
plan. Of course. Justice shall be done. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan.
Our brethren's
Certainly.
town is under attack.
Is there danger? For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. The light is my strength.
Justice. Our brethren's town is
Of
under
course.
attack.
Certainly. For honor.
Hello.
More
I stand for the light. Certainly. I'm here to help. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our brethren's
Certainly.
town is under
A
attack.
sound plan. Of course. The light is my strength. Certainly. A sound plan. Foul. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under
Certainly.
attack.
For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For my father.
Our forces are under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. For Lord Aron.
Betrayal of the light.
I stand for the light. Of course.
Allied hero has been
Certainly.
killed.
The light is my strength.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Our hero
Justice shall
Our
be done.
brethren's town is under
Of course.
attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course.
Our brethren's town is under
Certainly.
attack.
A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. You are past redemption. For Lord Oran. Of course. A sound plan. For honor.
Betrayal of light. Our hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack. An allied hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack.
I'm here to help. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. I stand by the light. Light is my strength. For honor. Of course. Stand for the light. For honor. Of course. Justice shall be done. For honor. Of course. Certainly. I stand for the light. For honor.
An allied hero has
sound
been
plan.
killed. Our brethren's town is under attack.
A sound
An allied
plan.
hero has been killed.
Of course. A sound plan. Certainly.
An allied hero
A sound
has been
plan.
killed.
Of course. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Is there danger? A sound plan. You are past redemption. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. I'm here to help. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor.
Feel my wrath.
A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For my father. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound
An allied hero has been foul knave. Justice is come.
Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course.
Our hero has been killed. Our brethren's town is under attack. Our brethren's town is under attack.
Is there danger? Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. The light is my strength. Justice shall be done. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
You are past redemption.
The light is my strength. A sound plan. Certainly. Justice shall be done. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Is there danger? A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Foul name. For honor. A sound plan.
An allied
Certainly.
hero has been killed.
Of
Our
course.
brethren's town is under
Certainly.
attack.
A sound
Our
plan.
forces are under attack.
Stand for the
You are past redemption.
light.
For Lord Oran, betrayer of the light. An allied hero has
Certainly.
been killed.
For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly.
An allied hero is under attack.
A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Hero has been killed.
I stand for the light. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor.
Our
Certainly.
brethren's town is under attack.
Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound
Our
plan.
brethren's town is under
For honor.
attack.
Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Stop.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For honor.
An allied
A
hero.
sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
An allied hero has been killed.
Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound
Our
plan.
brethren's town is under
You are
attack.
Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan.